That son of a... Clementine yelled out, giving the ground a frustrated punch. She furiously threw the piece of rope away, knowing full well who it belonged to and what exactly it meant. Sarah picked it up on her anger, upon looking a bit alarmed when she placed a hand on Clementine's shoulder. Clem, is everything all right? What's the matter? Letting out some more labored sigh, Clementine turned to her friend. Don't you recognize that rope? She asked in a low voice, nodding towards the frayed paste in the snow. Maybe you will if you see this one. She dug deeper into her pockets, pleased to find the small piece of rope still inside. As she pulled it out, she noted 3 knots tied around the center. Sarah gasped, her hands flying up to cover her mouth. So that was yours, but that one... She gazed over the piece of snow in disbelief. Clementine nodded. It's Troy's. A dead silence fell upon the group, as a few words were heavy enough to constrict their labored very bodies. The weight of reality was not lost on everyone, as it seemed. So he used to dad shut doors? Sarah asked, yawning on her lip apprehensively. Yes, Clementine answered quietly. He did it so it would break open easily, so we could escape. Jane's eyes flickered open with a brief of hope. So brief that Clementine wasn't so sure she hadn't imagined it, but before suspicion clouded over. Do we know for a fact what it is us for, though? And what if all that rope they had, and he was just stupid? Clementine shook her head. No, you heard the guards. They had a small amount of rope, but they had some. He was expected to use that to tie the door shut, but instead he used his own piece of rope from Sarah's activity all those nights ago. Bonnie breathed. I can't believe he hung that for one. Hard to believe, Mike agreed, with a nod. Kenny shook his head, arguing. We don't have time to wonder about that asshole. He did us a favor on purpose or not. But the only thing we should be focusing on is how we are going to rescue AJ. We can't afford to fuck that up. Getting AJ to safety was absolutely important, and Clementine wasn't denying that. She wasn't able to concentrate on the infant with this current moment. A cold numbness washed over her, the same empty feeling that could be said when she first felt that when Troy betrayed them. This time, though, it was because of the opposite occurrence. Someone she thought had turned on her for good and done something to help. All of her bitterness and hatred just evaporated like water on a hot day. Not even a drop left, as if though it was never there in the first place. She had been wrong in her assumption that he had abandoned them. Still, though, she doubted he helped her for completely altruistic reasons. Clementine had to face that Troy was done something to save them. He had saved her life a couple times in the past, but she just assumed that was a reflex, as she'd done so many times for the others. She saw someone in danger and she had a weapon. She'd usually help them out, regardless of who they were, and she just assumed Troy and those were the same instincts. But it had been a planned act of complete selflessness. He was still stuck with the house guards, and he had risked his safety with his allies to let the old ones be free. It was so blindly unlike the type of man she thought he was, even though she considered him as an ally, but she couldn't think of straight for a few moments. Her mind churned in conflicting emotions and thoughts, memories blurring into contracting mess. I don't understand why she began, the rest of the sentence dying on her tongue. Clem, Kenny said, his voice startling out of her thoughts. We can think about that later, okay? Right now we need to come up with a plan to go after AJ. She followed his gaze in tire tracks in the snow, traveling with the pattern up to the hill and surely over it. It was hard to imagine what Kenny was thinking, so she nodded and replied, Okay, sure, we'll need to follow the tracks quickly, though, before the snow covers it. The large snowflakes gently falling from the sky, it didn't look so threatening, but the snow was unpredictable, and they needed to follow that trail. Y'all can be suggesting we follow a truck on foot, Bonnie snorted, crossing her arms. You must be Olympic runners if you think you're going to catch up. Kenny narrowed his eyes. So what do you suggest, Bonnie? Bonnie quirked an eyebrow, an expression almost as if he was seriously asking her. Did you already forget when we were tinkering back at that house, Kenny? That very thing that Clem and Troy got out to get a park for? Kenny's voice brightened in the realization, as if it was a cartoon. A light bulb would surely have gone off right above his head. Ah, he said. I reckon that truck would be a good thing to chase after the truck with. Speaking of, Bonnie quickly added, looking at Clementine. Do you still have that jumper cable, right, Clem? Promptly, Clementine shook her shirts through her pockets and smoothed her fingers over the cable. Yep, she replied with a smile. Good, and I'm so glad we could finally agree on something, Kenny chimed. Let's head back. Kenny cleared his throat. Hold on just a minute. A collective groan spread through the group, but Clementine gave Kenny her attention. After everything she talked about him in the night before, and given how clear her mind had seemed overall, she assumed whatever he had to say was important. Almost nervously, Kenny just suggested his hat. I know it ain't the best idea to split up, but I don't want to waste any more time. Then let's stop talking and go, Jane tried to interact, but Kenny wouldn't let her. If those tire tracks disappear, he continued a bit louder, we're shut out of luck, and AJ's gone forever. I ain't taking that chance. Kenny's fists shook at the sides, and his eyes squeezing shut tightly. I'm going to try and follow them on foot, to at least scout out the route. The rest of the group was quiet for a moment, pursuing the idea. No one seemed to immediately reject it, at least. Clementine didn't think it was out of the question. But what if you run into trouble? Sarah asked wide-eyed. Wouldn't you have any way to know where you are? Now it was Clementine's turn to imagine a light bulb above her head. I know what we can use. She rustled around in her pocket, extracting the walkie-talkie that she still had on her from before. Once more she thanked over whatever gods were out there that her guards didn't search her before tying her up. Sarah's face lit up when she saw what Clementine had, and pulled out her walkie-talkie from her pocket. I see, she cried, waving a bit with her hand. I'm so glad we found these, and at least the guards didn't take them. Me too, Clementine replied with a slight smile. Hold on, Clem. I ain't sure I want you going with me, Kenny argued. We won't be armed. She crossed her arms in irritation. It's not your decision to make these for me, she reasoned. I'm going and that's that. Kenny then blinked and paused, as if thinking over whether to argue or not. Clementine had to cut off any protests he tried to make. Besides, I can't leave Troy there, she said with a reluctant sigh. As much as I hate Troy as part of our group, I know he's my responsibility since I let him in, so I'll go after him and bring him back. If we find him in the other guard, they can lead us to AJ, Kenny pointed out. I'll go with you and we'll bring AJ and that douche, if he wants to come back, that is, and if he don't mind a little chat with me later. Clementine scoffed with a smirk. Can't argue with that, she added. Can you, hit his shoulder for me? Sarah asked. I mean, not his bad shoulder. I mean, not to hurt him. Her words then trailed off, but slightly bopped her in the palm of Clementine's shoulder. Kind of like that. As Sarah Brand F you, I assume, Mike chuckled, and Sarah turned red. Not exactly, just, you already had us fooled, don't be mean like that again kind of thing. She fidgeted, picking up her nails absent-mindedly. I know he's not a terrible person anymore, but I'm still mad. Yeah, you seem pretty forgiving with the pistol whipped ya, Jane noted. Why is that? Clementine was curious about that too. She turned to Sarah expectantly. Once she noticed that she was in the spotlight, the older girl blushed and rubbed the back of her neck nervously. Well, because he apologized, she said. Before he hit me, he whispered that he was sorry. It wasn't a shock. Clementine did recall seeing the man's lips move slightly before he struck Sarah, and it seemed that her eyes didn't even receive her. He really did apologize to her, and seemed to regret that he did such a thing only to show loyalty. This doesn't excuse his actions or anything, but I think I remember saying that he really mustn't want to go through with that. Sarah laughed a little. At least at how he was very willingly to do it, so I could see that being a big difference. Clementine smiled. Yeah, for sure, but you always do see the good side in people, and I'm not very surprised. Bit of a bad habit, Jane mumbled, although it was half-hearted. Sarah just blushed in embarrassment. Well, still, thank you, Clem, she giggled softly, her facial expression melting into seriousness. But I don't think we should be wasting any more time. AJ and Troy are counting on us. She's right, Kenny said with a nod. Let's head out then. Clementine agreed and then turned to Sarah once more. We'll have to check up on the others with walkie-talkies like before. With a nod, Sarah replied, I just hope I won't have to contact you in a panic this time. I think we'll be okay, Clementine assured, although she can't be certain. It did seem like Sarah's side would be the one in danger this time. If we do happen to get the truck working quickly, we'll let you know immediately. Maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle, Bonnie suggested. Will we all fit in the truck, though? Arvo asked a bit timidly. Not seem that big. Mike shrugged and suggested, we'll have to squeeze in if we have to, or someone could stay back at the house and guard the supplies. There's no need for all of us to risk our necks at once. Arvo nodded, understanding. I'll stay back, he volunteered, then added softly, but I will help if really needed. Good luck, Clementine. He nodded to her, only her, and struggled to his feet, as Sarah was at his side quickly, helping him stand. They'll be fine, the older girl assured him. Clem's a tough cookie. Clementine snorted at the nickname, chuckling under her breath. Kenny stifled down a few snicker of his own, forcing himself in all seriousness. That is, but we need to go now, he said. Clementine followed him down the rope path, leaving the others behind in the cover of trees. Snow continued to fall, but the flakes were getting larger and more frequent, and the wind was picking up as well. No longer they saw the sky or the blush, or even the white, rather darkened to miserable gray hue, a telltale sign of a storm approaching. Clementine swallowed hard as she studied for the weather for a few more moments, praying to whatever was coming would hold off until they brought AJ back safely. Gazing back at the others, a sense of dread settled on its way to her. See you later, she whispered, and she hoped with all of her heart that it would be the last time she saw them. As far as the truck seemed to stretch out beyond the hill, the two of them were not on the road for as long as Clementine had thought. It was a bit further down the forest and ended up in a slightly smaller hill, but they finally came upon the sight of the stopped truck in a large patch of snow and trees. Thankfully, it hadn't stopped in the middle of the clearing. If so, there was a closer to duck down into. When they first noticed a stopped vehicle, Clementine instantly crouched down and crawled to a nearby bush. She heard louder footsteps of Kenny as he maneuvered behind her, trying his best to cover by the smaller shrub. Once she was settled, she raised her head far enough to peek over the tops of her cover, cautiously observing the scene before her. Lowell and Troy were standing near the truck, with both their backs turned. They seemed to be chattering amongst themselves. Lowell was kicking the door to the truck, while Troy just shook his head. They didn't seem to be talking yet, so Clementine took this opportunity to keep her friend posted about the situation. Sarah, she murmured into their own walkie-talkie, we found Troy and Lowell's truck. That's awesome, Clem, Sarah called back, a little too loudly. Shh, Sarah, we need to be quiet, Clementine reminded her, continuing. They're stopped for now, but I don't know if they're going to be turning back to chase us or keep going. We'll listen and decide if we need to stop them. Got it, Sarah replied, much softer this time. We're still walking back to the safe house. Let me know if anything changes. Clementine nodded, even though she knew Sarah couldn't see her. Sure, will do. The line went silent as she pushed the walkie-talkie back in her pocket for now. Things seem to be all right, Kenny said, as she nodded wordlessly. Clementine bent down to brush the further side of herself, Kenny alongside beside her. The two of them crouched down motionless, their ears perked and eyes still focused. Lowell had finally given an irritated growl, clutching the walkie-talkie in his hand. I cannot believe this shit, man. How did they manage to get out? How the hell did they manage to escape so quickly? For a good measure, he kicked the back of the truck again, and a dull thud echoing around it. Troy shifted so his face was miserable, looking neutral as a guilty party would. I don't know, might have been your shit driving. Must have ran over like those 10 fucking potholes. It is my fault that the forest path wasn't so paved, Troy, Lau snapped, turning to face his comrade. Just hang on, I gotta do a radio Tavia about this. He pressed a button on the walkie-talkie, bringing up to his mouth to speak. However, before he could, Troy stepped towards him, cutting off any words. Now hold on, Tavia thinks we're frickin' idiots, Lau. If you call her right now and tell her we lost the prisoners, she's gonna be chasing forever. Well, do you think that will end well for us? Lau hesitated, biting on his lip. I don't think so, no, but I also do think we can do this by ourselves. There's 2 of us, and there's 10 of them. So there's really 7. Same thing, 7 versus 2. Even if we don't count the kids, that's 5 adults versus 1 man with a gun and 1 with no arm. Anyone we be outmatched, Lau argued, shaking his head. Come on, Troy, use your head. With a scowl, Troy retorted. All right, Lau, since you think you're so frickin' smart, don't you think you'll be miles away from where they fell out by now? Lau blinked in confusion. But when did they escape? You said you didn't hear anything, but I swore I felt the whole truck getting lighter after a while. He paused briefly, gears turning in his head. Come to think of it, why didn't you want to stop at one point? We suspected that something was wrong. Troy's eyes darted around, and Clementine's heart sank when she realized how transparent he was being. I didn't hear them originally, but doing the math based on what you started suspecting things, it was a while ago, you know. The tremor in Troy's voice was unmistakable, and Lau seemed to be picking it up almost instantly. And you only thought something was wrong. Troy, Lau began slowly, you tied that door shut this morning, didn't you? Yeah, of course I did. Why? Did it strike you odd when you were carrying 7 people in our truck that suddenly lost the weight of all of them? And didn't you feel it? Lau asked. His words were slow and then worked out of logic. If I were you, I'd be worried about getting the door shut tight enough, because they wouldn't have opened it otherwise, right? With a scoff, Troy then still tried to pay it off. You know, I shouldn't be about up if I ever do. Yeah, I know you don't, but in this case, it sure seems like it. You knew what happened. What? Why the fuck would I? Troy stammered, but Lau cut him off immediately. You were the only person who made sure the door was shut. If you knew they would escape, it was because you were the ones responsible for it happening. Lau's words died away as his eyes widened, his jaw dropping to disbelief. Troy stepped back, his expression unreadable, but clearly on edge. Oh, frick, Troy, you didn't do what? Troy asked, his tone definitely defensive. His hand shot out and ripped Lau's collar, giving him the other man challenging punch. You two chicken shit on what you say on your mind? The next few actions seemed to spill after another, and it felt like a can of paint splattered onto the ground. Lau then leaned his head towards the speaker of the walkie-talkie, beginning to rely something on the other side. Tavia, the prisoners have escaped. I think Troy... Without a warning, Troy lunged forward. It didn't seem like he intended to knock the older man down, but a sudden movement was enough to startle Lau. With a screech of surprise, he fell down, hitting his back against the ground with a painful, rounding thump. The radio fell from his palm, skidding to a few inches out of his reach. Troy then stood over him, gazing down but keeping silent. In a panic, Lau cradled towards the radio, pulled a knife from his side, and pointed towards Troy shaky. Don't you frickin' move, he ordered. Unfortunately for him, Troy was on the offensive, and his unpredictable actions weren't a clue enough. He clearly didn't think he had much to lose without hesitation. He stomped over to Lau in a single stride, kicking the radio further away. With Lau gazing over the walkie-talkie in despair, this gave Troy a small window of time to beat the knife out of the man's hand. It was quick, and it was stupidly risky, but somehow it was pulled off. Getting Tavia's attention seemed more important to Lau than subduing Troy, though. He had leapt to his feet and rushed over to the walkie-talkie, his weapon but all forgotten at the moment. Once he retrieved it, he picked it back up and called, Tavia, please come back. Troy's gone frickin' nuts. Troy then placed towards Lau, only to be backed up nervously, his legs trembling. Lau then pressed the walkie-talkie's button and tried to communicate with the boss. A hiss of static sounded from the other side. Tavia's voice was breaking through. We hear you. Try to pin him down and hold on. We're running back now. Should be there in 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, he replied shakily. Vera's voice came in through next to the static. Lau, do you have a weapon? She asked, more than a hint of panic in her voice. You got rid of my knife. Then use your gun, you frickin' idiot, she snapped. The idea didn't seem to dawn on Lau until now, as if the scarecrow suddenly remembering he had a brain. After all, Orin this chased a gun. He reached into the pocket of his own hip, taking out the pistol he used the whole time, pointing it threateningly at Troy, and he called into the radio again. Okay, I've got him. Hurry, though. On it, Vera responded. The radio then cut out. Troy shook his head pathetic at the gun's barrel staring down. It ain't any of your business, but Vera seems kind of worried about you. That's sort of cute. Maybe it'd be worth it if you tell her you feel the same way. Lau then paused and words catching him off guard. What the hell are you talking about? His face flushed, but although it was hard to tell for him, anger or embarrassment. Just shut up, asshole. I don't need advice from a traitor. Troy lifted his arm in surrender. Okay, I'm crossing the line. I get you, he said lowly. Although I do think it's worth keeping that drama to the minimum, huh? Especially in groups like Hal's. Lau's eyes have narrowed, shoving the gun further into Troy's direction. Just screw off. I know what you're trying to do. And talking about Vera isn't going to do it. Troy raised an eyebrow. Oh, what am I going to do then? He asked, tilting his head, like a curious dog. With a frustrated growl, Lau then stepped closer to him, with an arm's length. You're going to let my guard down, trying to get me to drop my gun. Well, I'm not going to. We're going to stand here and wait for Tavia and the others to come back, and they'll decide what to do with you. Still too lazy to come up with your own ideas, huh, Lau? Troy snickered, chuckling. Too bad you did exactly what you just said and you wouldn't. What? Troy rolled his eyes. You let your guard down. He moved quickly and this time intending to bring Lau down with a straight-on tackle. However, the push didn't cause the gun to go off right before the two tumbled to the ground. The shot echoing through the quiet forest. The weapon skidded to a few feet away from them, but the released bullet had torn into Troy's side, blood bursting from the flesh wound as he yelped, but it didn't seem to make him waver. In fact, he was strongly trying to pin his foe down, with only one hand to do so. There was a flash of limbs as they battled each other like cats, swearing and spitting in anger. Lau's hand had swatted Troy's face, shoving the man's chin up away as his arms stretched. Troy managed to snag his wrist and wrestled down his arm, leaving the other one free. Unfortunately, Lau had gotten even more advantage of having two arms. Troy was still fighting, but the injury on his side was clearly making him weaker. Lau dug his fingers into the wound, grinding his dirty nails into the bloody mess as violently as he could. Troy howled in pain, clutching his side with only one arm, leaving himself open, and Lau to jump onto the opportunity, quickly flipping the position so where he was straddling Troy now. His hands went for Troy's throat, squeezing tightly as he could. No smart-ass comments, huh? He spat, eyes burning like fire. Troy then suffered and gasped underneath him, trying in vain to use one arm to break the two. Clementine's heart wrenched as she was looking at his panicked expression, and the instinct nearly made her stand up. In fact, she was almost to her feet when Kenny laid a hand down on her shoulder, pulling her back down with a shake of his head. Don't put yourself in danger like that. This is his bed, and let him lie in it, he whispered. It wasn't that she wanted it to, but her legs felt like jelly, just her heartbeat was so loud to her ears. She doubted she'd be able to move in time anyway. So like a coward she stayed there, watching as helplessly as Troy was strangled. He thrashed around violently underneath the other man, trying in vain to break it free. This just made Lau's grip tighter. However, his expression was darkened to a terrifying picture of bloodlust. But just as Clementine feared the worst, some last bit of strength seemed to release through Troy. With a yelp of desperation, he shaked his arm towards Lau's stomach, something glimmering in his hand. It remained outstretched for a long moment, gasps from both men filling the air. Finally, Lau's grip on the throat loosened, a sharp hiss leaving his lips. Troy choked more air as he pulled his arm back, as quickly as globs of liquid dripping down from his fingers, painting the snow red. It didn't take Clem to realize what was in his hand, the hunting knife he had been given by Tavia herself, glistening with Lau's blood. In less than a blink of an eye, Troy had sunk the blade into the colleague's stomach, dragged it back out again. Lau's arms trembled and his breath as it became raspy, his eyes bulging out of the... How did you... he gasped, eyes screwing shut in pain. Not be able to say more, Lau fell forward and collapsed onto Troy with his forehead against the man's chest. Troy flinched as his wound touched, but ultimately let Lau lean on his weight onto him. That only sounds like a little bit of winter air. Lau's gasping breaths quickly turning into weak wheezes. Tavia. Lau's head then shifted out, glossy eyes continuously searching for his boss. Come quickly. I've got him. In the rare moment of kindness, Troy murmured something to him, but Clementine couldn't hear what he said. It seemed like a soothing nonsense, though something she didn't know. Troy was capable of thinking up, especially to a man that he killed himself. Troy didn't say anything more, and just simply stabbed the knife's blade into Lau's skull, killing him instantly. Clementine had to look away, her eyes screwed shut. Kenny placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a comforting squeeze. It wasn't a cruel thing to do, in terms of preventing to turn into a walker, and stopping the pain like an animal being slaughtered. It was quick and merciful, but it didn't make it pleasant to watch late either. After a minute, Clementine gazed back in time to watch Troy crawled out from under the corpse, cringing a bit as he put the strain on his wound, his breath hitching, and he placed his hand on his side, blood clearly visible despite the dark material. Sucking in air through his teeth, the man finally managed to struggle free. It took long moments, but Clementine's heart filled with when she saw Troy finally stood up. He didn't seem that hurt, just winded. Taking a few deep breaths, he finally seemed to be recovered, directing his gaze down at Lao's lifeless body. "Just my frickin' luck, huh?" he sighed, presumably talking to the body. "I didn't even have to do that, but I felt like I ain't having any other choice. Sorry, man." It felt weird to hear Troy, of all people, directly apologize like that. If it was a person no longer to live. The man frowned, brushing himself off, and eventually crouching down next to Lao again, only to take the gun. Looking over, he placed it onto his belt, and he grabbed the body by the wrist. With a few grunts and groans of efforts, he began to drag it away from the main clearing. Towards some bushes, and of course, he chose the bushes, body hiding exactly where the same bushes Clementine and Kenny were hiding. Clementine held her breath, trying to stay as still as possible in case Troy decided to walk past. But luck just wasn't on their side, for Troy practically toppled over her and he approached the bushes, shouting in surprise and searching for what could have tripped him. And at once he spotted her. Troy's face then grew more pale than from his injury. "Clementine? Oh, frick!" he shrieked, dropping his grip on Lao. The body flopped lifelessly in the snow, but he didn't seem to care at all. "Am I seeing things? I gotta be seeing things," he mumbled to himself, rubbing his eye to try and will image her way. "Nope, I'm really here," she confessed, with a small sheepish grin. It wasn't that she was happy about any of the circumstances, but an awkward sort of nervousness forced her to smile nevertheless. Troy let out a long groan. "No, no, no," he mumbled, shaking his head in frustration. "What the hell are you even doing here? Why are you here?" She frowned, unsure why he seemed so angry. "What do you mean by that?" She couldn't help but ask, not bothering to hide a bit of irritation in her own. You weren't supposed to follow, you little shit." Troy's mutter grew volume as he focused more of his fury in the sky, although yelling at a god or fate itself. "For Christ's sake, let me just catch a damn break." She then rolled her eyes, almost feeling relieved as his normal pig-headed attitude had returned. In place in the previous cold indifference was downright unnerving. It was her chance to talk to him again, like normal. It didn't feel right, considering what they had at stake, but she longed for the sympathetically of considering him a harmless idiot. Chewing her lip, Clementine spoke carefully. "Troy, are you okay?" She studied the wound on his side, noting that it was bleeding profusely, but it seemed painful. Troy followed her eyes and just seemed to remember that he was hurt. Yeah, it's nothing, just a scratch." "Oh, okay then." She didn't believe him completely, but he did seem rather casual about it, and she didn't seem to really want to dwell on it right now. Instead, she decided to inquire about his past choices, something that had been haunting her since she had found the truth. Did you already leave that rope for us?" "To easy get out?" "Yeah," Troy finished for her, rolling his eyes. "Y'all did take advantage of the opportunity to run like the other frickin' direction." "Well, most of us did," Clementine admitted. "Everyone else is headed back to the safe house to get the truck." She wasn't so sure she would be telling him this, but something kept her talking. "They'll meet up with us later." Kenny then cleared his throat, trying to stop her from saying any more into the subject. "Honestly, asshole, think about it. There ain't no way in hell we're leaving AJ behind." Troy must have not noticed Kenny until that moment, for he nearly jumped at the man's words, and all at once, realization swept over his expression. If he hadn't considered that logic, actually his words confirmed just that. "Oh, I forgot about that stupid baby. Figures you all want to find a loophole or what you want with it anyway," he sighed, studying the snowy ground. "Well, as best as I could come up with on a short notice, so my bad, I guess." Clementine shook her head. "No, it was a smart plan and helpful. It saved our lives." Her voice then quaked with emotions as she met his eyes in her feet. She couldn't be able to do that for a while. "Thank you, Troy." He then looked stunned from the phrase, blinking in surprise. His jaw hoovered open, but it took a while for any words to come out. Yeah, whatever. For Don't mention it, you little shit. He coughed a bit in embarrassment, then looked away. Kenny narrowed his eyes. We heard the distress call from your boss, huh, buddy? He said, pointing directly at Lau's corpse at the last word. The truck they're driving has our little guy in it. Any idea how to ambush those fuckers? Troy then scrunched his eyebrows in confusion. What? Ambush? There's just 3 of them with 3 guns, you idiot. Y'all have none. Do the math, you'll be shot at this time. But we have to get AJ, Clementine pressed. If they continue towards house, we may lose them in the snow. Trust me, they won't keep going. Tavia may be a crazy bitch, but she's focused. I'll give her that, Troy murmured. She's gonna want to find you all, either capture or kill y'all right away. I don't know which, but it'll be a distraction for a while. Clementine swallowed hard quickly, not wanting to imagine Tavia walking down a line of prisoners on her knees and executing them one by one. She shook her head clear of the thoughts and arguing. We can't leave AJ. Isn't there anything we can do once they get back here? No, there ain't, Troy snapped. Not then, I mean. Y'all know where Tavia's endgame is? Where she's heading eventually. If y'all could stay out of her sight long enough, she'll eventually have to give up and take the baby to house. You can all regroup with her there or cut her off on their way back. Wait for an opening and grab the kid. That did make some sense. Clementine glanced at Kenny, trying to determine the emotion behind the man's expression. I guess that may work, he said, not seemingly completely convinced. Troy nodded. Of course it will work. I know what I'm... A rumble went off in the distance, shut him up immediately, startling all 3 of them. Troy especially seemed spooked. Turning away and cursing under his breath, hurried towards the middle of the clearing. Bending down, he looked around frantically. He scooped up whatever was left he was looking for, returned to Clementine and Kenny quickly. Here, he whispered, noticeably out of breath. Y'all take care of this, and y'all need to go, like I frickin' wanted to in the first place. He then handed him what he picked up off the ground. It was Lau's radio. Clementine hesitantly took it, glancing back at him. Aren't you going to come with us? She scrunched her eyebrows in confusion. If there was enough time to hide, wasn't there? But he simply shook his head, reaching down to his own belt to grab Lau's gun. No, there ain't. She was about to respond when Troy actually bent down to her level, something he'd never done to her before. Stunned, she could only note that his eyes had a no on the par with hers, like he was no longer looking down on her. Wordlessly, he handed the gun over to Clementine, pointing it down and back up at her. Y'all best get out of here fast, he murmured. There ain't much time. She nodded firmly, trying not to think about it too hard of any of this. Wait, asshole, Kenny stomping down hissed. We can't agree with this. I'm just gonna run in while those fuckers... Troy then snapped his gaze towards the older man. Y'all get a chance to attack later. I swear, just let me do my own thing. After a brief pause, he stood back up and faced Kenny. I got no reason to ask you this, but trust me. Kenny's mouth hoovered open to reply, but Troy cut him off and shut him up with a single word. Please. Not another word was said. The rumbling was suddenly becoming larger and clearer, and the source was definitely growing closer. Clementine felt her heart speed up at the sound, looking hesitantly towards Kenny and Troy. But Troy turned his back to them, beginning to hug Lau's corpse in the opposite direction. He kicked it on the ground, shuffling a bit at the snow. It looked so sporadic as the bloodstains were mixed up. By the time the truck finally came into view, the ground was a mess and hid any certain direction that the body had been dragged in. Clementine ducked down further in the bushes, afraid of being spotted. Kenny did the same, flying himself up against the forest floor as they both exchanged a glance. I can't just leave him, Clementine whispered. If he wants us to go, I don't think it's right. Kenny pierced his lips. It means stall them so we can leave, but I ain't going anywhere. Clementine frowned. Kenny, please don't jump out. He shook his head. I ain't doing that either, don't worry. We'll see what happens first. But I think he better point out where AJ from Howe's could be, the worst case scenario. A bit of pride kindled in Clementine's heart for that man's response. She felt immediately relieved that she was willing to wait instead of jumping head first. Something in her mind that he was very fond of, trying to hide the emotion from choking in her voice. She murmured, "Thank you." Kenny then smiled back, and looking back, they both smiled simultaneously, grew silent, and watched carefully through the bush. The snow started to pick up a bit, making the view more obscured, but it wasn't quite as bad like that yet. The truck then stopped a few feet away from Troy, who was clearly pretending to have been caught in the act of dumping Lau's body. Within seconds, Tavia and the other two guards practically leaped out of the truck, swinging open the doors and forcing hopping down into the snow. Once they paced closer to him, Troy promptly dropped the grip on the corpse. "You got here so quickly, huh?" he noted, straightening himself up. On the old habits die hard, it seemed, for his stance mimicked this soldier's calm, collected, and ready. He was standing quite a few meters away from Clementine, but he could easily see the serious look that settled onto his face. Tavia seemed to not be in the mood for Troy's false sense of loyalty, though. Her posture was equally proud, face tightened, drawn out of cold as he responded, "Honestly, I wasn't expecting much, yet somehow it seems like I was let down anyway." She then looked down, looking very much like a disappointed mother, like Troy had been caught drawing on the walls and not murdering his own co-worker. Vera noticed Lau's body right away, audibly gasping and staring straight at horror. You killed him?" she demanded, her voice quivering. "Why? How would you?" Tyler then stepped in, filing in the gasped words. "Why would you do such a thing?" he said, a dangerous look upon his face. "He had his hands around my throat, strangling me," Troy explained, closing his eyes briefly and looking away. "I didn't want to have to do it, but it ended up being me or him." "Well, I wish it had been with you," Vera snarled, her fists tightened on the grip of her gun. She took a step towards him, but Tavia held her arm out to hold her back. "There was definitely a struggle," Tyler noted, the expression turning off rather maliciously. "I could see you got shot, but Lau wouldn't have turned on you if he hadn't done something to set him off." Troy then looked down on his good side again, his fingers pressing gently into the wound. With a wince, he muttered, "Yeah, the son of the bitch got me real good." "I hope it hurts like hell," Vera added, spitting at Troy's feet. "God, I was so right to not trust you when we found you again. We should have never let you back in." "Before we integrate him, let's get the last of our rope," Tavia instructed, her tone clipped, "and we'll tie him up against that tree."